Good morning, folks. Real pleasure to have Eric Dirst today. I worked with Eric for a couple of decades. He is president of DeKonsultere. That's a Norwegian term. I'll have Eric explain what that means, which provides CIO and board level services to small and mid-sized companies. He had previously executive roles at Telum and DeBry, which are leading for-profit trade and tech educational institution. Before that, he was CIO at Serva as an Allied Van Lines. So he's had quite an illustrious career. I've had the pleasure to work with him a couple of times. Eric, welcome aboard. Hope you're doing well. How are you doing with the hockey, kind of shortened season? And tell us more about yourself and explain that Norwegian name to the folks.
Yeah, thanks, Vinnie. Thanks very much. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you inviting me. So DeKonsultere, I'll start with that. So when I left Adtalem, so I've been in big business for almost 18 years as CIO twice, once of a Fortune 500, once obviously of a Fortune 1000, and then eventually president of a $500 million division of Adtalem. And when I left, I said I really didn't want to do the big company thing anymore. I wanted to do a smaller company. And as I was looking for a innovative name that would have a story behind it, because you always want to have a story behind the name, I figured, well, why not leverage my Norwegian heritage? My family's been here since the 1600s, coming over from Norway. And I looked up words in Norwegian. I don't know any Norwegian. The only word I know is DeKonsultere because I looked it up. Now, my great-grandma did speak fluent Norwegian, but unfortunately, I never learned any. So hopefully that's enough background. If you want any more specifics, just let me know.
Tell us a little bit more about how you left the big company and why you started the small one, and what you've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah, sure. So I started this because I really wanted to work for multiple small companies. I loved kind of doing that inside a big company. I would work for multiple divisions. Obviously, that's what a CIO has to do. They kind of have to be a servant to the various business units. I like that concept. I just wanted to do it with smaller companies where I could maybe move a little faster, be a little more nimble, make a bigger impact. That was really my goal. And as part of doing that, I've started working with, I still work with some educational entities, but I also branched out into non-educational things. So I work with some manufacturing services. I work with a dental company. I also work with some tech companies. So I've kind of broadened my spectrum, which was good for me. It's a little more challenging, you got to be, but it's also fun because I can bring things cross industry, because it's very interesting to me. Many industries don't look to borrow from other industries. They look within their own industry to try to innovate, and instead of realizing that they can bring things across industry, and I try to do that through my customers.
Well, let's focus a bit on the higher education sector because you've spent so much time there. So Eric, in all the doom and gloom in the last few months, it's actually been an amazing time for innovation and acrobatic. I call them acrobatics, right? So we've seen auto companies try to make ventilators. We've seen 3M quadruple N95 masks. We've seen the SBA and community banks approve 5 million small business PPP emergency loans. We've seen all the last mile logistics from your server background. Just amazing how smoothly that's worked, given the scale. So it's all been just, in the doom and gloom, we don't hear much about that. But a lot of stuff has been going on. Higher education, I interviewed the dean of my business school, and I mean, you can just feel the pain, moving from campus to online. But they did it in 2 weeks. I'm sure you have tons of stories about some of the heroics you've seen in higher education. Tell us about some.
You bet. If somebody would have asked me if major colleges could move to fully online in 2 weeks prior to COVID, I actually honestly would have said, not a chance. I wouldn't have believed it. Yes, of course, the schools that have been heavily online for years, places like the DeVry universities of the world and others that are, yes, they could, but I would have been skeptical of the more traditional schools to be able to do it. So I've been as impressed as you are that we were able to pull this off. Now, the good news is people probably didn't realize most schools had invested in online course shells for years, but they were not where the education and instruction happened. They were where the ancillary materials went, where the course notes went, where the presentations went. Maybe they had quizzes and tests through that, but the actual instruction did not occur there. So the good news is that the framework was there for most places to move, and that's why they were able to move so fast. Having said that, the challenges were still, they had to contact their provider, because most of them use a handful of providers like Blackboard or others like that. The Canvas is a big one. That's the one I'm pretty familiar with. Then there's a number of other ones, and they had to, those providers had to scale, and kudos to them. I have not heard anybody give them as much kudos as they really should get for being able to scale their environments for all these universities around the world. Now, don't get me wrong, some of them had problems. Just recently, Blackboard went down when everybody went back to school. So, but having said that, they came back up and they've been solid since then. So the other challenge was getting all the faculty trained, because I'll be honest, faculty are they're ironically, for being teachers, they are resistant to training. They like doing the same thing every year. That's part of the reason they got into teaching and they stayed in it, is because they like the fact that they can reuse a lot of their materials. They can do the same thing, and they have a plan and an approach. But people had to go out and do massive training to say, here's how to use the video. Here's how to use the live video. Wait a minute, you don't have a headset. You got to go out and get a headset. You got to maybe go get a better laptop, because maybe you don't have a good one at home or a good PC. Trying to do all that in 2 weeks, of course, explains why, all the Best Buys, emptied out of equipment with everybody doing that. But in addition, you had to, not only did you have to get the teaching online, you had to move student services, you had to move tutoring, you had to move financial aid, you had to move admissions all online. I'm even more amazed that got moved online, because a lot of schools didn't have good call center technologies. They didn't have soft phones. They had they still had the old desk phones. They didn't have maybe great VoIP systems, and they had to get that deployed and figure out how to get the call routing done to route it all to people's homes, and they were able to do that as well, which is very impressive. That the tech teams probably never been busier at these locations. So that's just a handful of some of the challenges that they had to go through, and there's a lot more that they had to do around content generation and just how to change the modality. If you want me to go into that, I can.
One thing I've heard is, how do you get parity between the physical and the digital world, right? So people are looking at hybrid models. How do you make the experience somewhat consistent? So yeah, talk about that if you can.
Yeah, you bet. So a lot of schools had dabbled in what we call blended learning. It has different names, but I'll just explain what that is. So blended learning would be, you have a good majority of your course instruction and weekly interaction online, but then maybe you have some live content that is maybe face-to-face, because it's a lab, right? You got to go in and physically touch things and that type of stuff. But a lot of companies or a lot of schools had not really embraced that modality. So this has forced them to do that. Even more so as they reopened here in the fall, they had to make decisions on what limited on-campus they could support, and really the only thing they figured they had to support would be that lab work, where you need some hands-on. I got to go touch machines. I got to go work with a cadaver. I got to go, work with a simulation machine. So they had to move to that blended model. And then you had to do advanced scheduling, because now you can only have so many people in your lab class. You can't have the full class in there. So now you got to have additional class options and more advanced scheduling. And then on the content side, the way, it's actually not as hard as everybody thinks to get a good interactive online. It's a combination of some live and recorded video, just like you and I are doing today with Zoom. There's plenty of tools out there, whether it be Teams or Zoom or WebEx, it doesn't matter. You can still have that live component with this. All young students these days, this is harder for the adult learners, but young students, they already have a PC, they already have a video camera, they already use it with online gaming, they all have this. So it was easy for them, harder for the faculty. Then you put in the collaboration tools that we've seen in business for years, and those are being finally incorporated and utilized in there. So we have threaded discussion groups, we have wikis, we have blog type things that the faculty can utilize. We have access to the call recordings. You have click to dial your fellow students. You can actually use the VoIP capabilities. You can set up live chat sessions, live video sessions at a click of a button. All that exists. It's just been finally brought over and embraced. Stuff that's been embraced in the business world is now finally being embraced in the education world. And you incorporate all that with a combination of interactive books, which is really taken off now. Your books are very different than what you and I remember. Your books now have embedded live quizzes. They have embedded videos. They have a place for you to take notes online digitally right there. I mean, it's really becoming a pretty amazing space.
That's fantastic to hear about all the innovation. Let's talk about the broader business model challenges, right? I've heard three big challenges. One is we've had a glut of higher education, right? Way too many institutions. Secondly, people are not convinced consumers, students want to pay as much for online versus campus. The third is we probably won't have many foreign students for a while, right? Are all those overblown concerns? How do you see the industry evolving?
Yeah, I do not think they're overblown concerns. I think this will be, at the end of the day, higher education is still pretty brand driven. The big brands that draw the people, they'll continue to draw the people, and they'll be smart and they'll innovate. They'll add combination blended learning, fully online learning, etc. I mean, Harvard's the best example I can think of to this. They were way out ahead of this. They've done this for years. This is not new for them. They already have fully online learning, certificates. A lot of it's post your 4-year degree, additional certificates, but they can bring that technology and that solutions right to the rest of their environment. So those big brands, I don't expect them to have any problems at all. The mid-tier brands, assuming they can keep the sports going, I think they'll still continue to be a big brand. Whether educators don't like to admit it, but sports that's where their marketing money goes, and that helps draw students. My youngest son is still in college at University of Illinois. He's down there on site at University of Illinois and taking online learning and doing labs. And I guarantee he doesn't want to come home and just do online learning. So there's definitely that desire to be on campus and have that experience. So I think that helps there. Where I think the struggle will be is the small private schools that don't have the brand. People may still want to go on site, but it's going to be a struggle for them to attract students, and they're probably going to have to lower costs. Now, the good news is, if schools are willing to embrace this and willing to change, when you start doing online learning, it is a lower cost modality. There is opportunity for higher margins, and you can pass some of that savings on to students and actually do lower cost offerings. There's a lot of fees that you would traditionally charge students for on-site activities that obviously they won't be taking advantage of in an online modality. And they could pass those fee savings as well as the staffing that they would need for on-site activities. I mean, let's be honest, this is terrible to say for the people working at the higher ed schools, but they're not going to need as much on-site staffing as they used to have, because they're not going to have as much on-site activity for a while, and it could be a long while. So they could reduce staff costs, and they could pass that on to students as well, giving a lower cost online environment while still maintaining their margins as an educational entity. Only the strong will be able to do this, because this is going to be hard for people to pass through, the various unions that make up a lot of the schools. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to take really strong leadership to make this happen, but it is very doable. The math's all there.
You're much more optimistic than I'm hearing from others, but that's good because you have the hands-on experience. Let's talk broadly about the likely labor situation post-COVID. Right? Pre-COVID, we had 6 million unfilled jobs. Most of them were trade jobs, trucking jobs, farming jobs, blue-collar jobs. Young people didn't want to go there. On the other hand, we had too many white-collar graduates with $1.5 trillion in debt. It seemed like we had an imbalance as COVID passes, I'm hearing a number of manufacturing companies saying, we're going to bring some of our offshore manufacturing back. We're seeing obviously the logistics area. I mean, the demand for people in last mile delivery. I mean, there are some sectors that are just hot, right?
Yep.
So it's a different labor need that is coming that we need. What does that mean? I mean, are our universities changing to become much more responsive to what the labor market needs?
Yeah, that's where I won't be as optimistic. Universities are slow to change. They are slow to react to macroeconomic changes, macro education changes. You know, the sad news is they. Well, let me start over. I'll say the positive. There are small schools that are already trade oriented. I work for one on the. I'm on the board of one on the West Coast, Carrington College, and they are specifically certificate based. 2-year and below type degrees and certificates, where they're very much oriented at students who didn't go to college right out of high school, maybe spent a few years and then realized, boy, I need to get something to get a more of a career out of this. And so they're very career oriented, and most of their programs are anywhere from, maybe a short of 9 months to a long of 2 years. And their graduation rate is very high. Community college graduation rates are horrible. I mean, they're in the 30s and 40%. This school is between 70 and 80 on almost all their programs, which is really, really high for a type of program like that. And their people get jobs because they're very focused on only career oriented. I think you'll see more schools at that level focus on that. Where I've seen the big challenge is I haven't seen too many be able to do it at the manufacturing trades. I've seen them be able to do it around the electrician, plumbing, the old traditional trades. I've seen them be able to do that. They've struggled with keeping up with how do I train people on CNC machines and advanced robotics and OSHA safety skills and all those type of things. They should be focusing on those things because that's what they're going to be hiring. The stuff that's going to come back is not it's not the manufacturing like creating concrete and creating steel, and that's not coming back. It's the advanced manufacturing that'll be coming back, and you'll need those people who know how to run those advanced machines. And the manufacturers, believe me, they don't like hiring people who don't know how to run those because they're expensive machines, and you mess them up, and it's a big problem for the shop floor.
On the positive side, I've talked to a couple of manufacturing executives about the labor shortage, and they said, one good thing is, if I can hire somebody who understands data science, manufacturing quite often is about planning and a lot of specific data-oriented thinking. So they weren't quite as concerned. But you're right. Somebody's got to get their hands dirty. It can't just be mental work when you're on the shop floor. And
well, that's another perception problem here. Is a lot of people think of manufacturing as get your hands dirty. That's there is certainly that, but most manufacturing shops that are coming back to they're clean floor manufacturing shops. You're not getting dirty on anything. Matter of fact, if there's dirt, that's a problem. These are advanced, machineries that cost millions of dollars producing advanced parts and running at high levels of volume. Believe me, cleanliness is next to godliness in these environments. So,
but things do break down on the shop floor, right? And somebody's got to open up the thing and tinker, and you can use augmented reality glasses, but you have to get your hands into something. That's what.
Yes. That is true.
I've been talking to a number of executives about reopening protocols, and they're turning out to be really complicated because local regulations are contradictory, unions have issues, very complex. What are you hearing from campuses about their reopening? We're just entering the fall semester. College football may or may not happen. What have you heard about reopening?
Yeah, I think the first thing that most schools are doing is they focus mostly on the testing, right? No surprise, that's not a surprise. I'll use my own son's school, University of Illinois. They're doing COVID testing twice a week with a innovative saliva test that actually was innovated at University of Illinois. So
You get a result back in a few hours, or
correct. Having said that, that's how it started off. They did hear back, but then they started to get backlogged, and now it's back to a couple days. But it did start off as a couple hours. So that's, of course, first and foremost, what most of them put in place is what's my testing protocol, such that at least I can figure out how to isolate. Then the next thing they had to do is, well, what do I do if I have outbreaks of a large group? Because it does happen at college. College kids aren't terribly afraid of COVID, to be quite honest, and hence they do stupid things. So then, okay, what's my protocol? So a lot of them have put protocols in place for quarantining, whether it be like frat houses. My son's in a frat. They had a protocol that said if you got COVID, they had a certain section of the house set up, and you would be in that, and you would be quarantined in that section of the house, anybody who got COVID. And they had a protocol for how they would get you food and stuff like that. So the frat houses are, even though they're often maligned, they have thought this through too. And then the other example they gave is they've arranged with hotels such that if they have any mass outbreaks, they go and put people in hotels. So they're now not, if you will, quote unquote, not on campus, not in the dorm. So they've thought this through pretty well, actually, I think, from dealing with that. The other challenge they've had, though, is the same one the businesses have, which is, what do I do for the buildings and people that have to go into class for the labs? Do I need to have them fill out surveys every time for legal protection that says, hey, I haven't been exposed to COVID, all the check boxes that you used to. Heck, I got to fill one of those out when I go to the hockey rink every time I go, matter of fact. Do I need temperature checks at the doors? If I do, that's a lot of staff that I need to have with a lot of gear that I got to go buy because I don't own that gear. Then I got to have, do I need to have any kind of, proximity checking? I know some companies that are really going whole hog with this. They have infrared cameras to tell if you got temperatures coming in and out. They got contact tracing to see who's standing near each other in case an outbreak happens. At least they know who to notify. Schools usually can't afford that kind of stuff that I just said. Businesses can, schools can't. So they have to deal with more manual mechanisms for doing all that activity. I know a few schools that have looked into those solutions. One of the companies I work with actually sells one of those solutions, and they've unfortunately just said, gosh, I can't afford to put that in all my buildings. They just can't do it. So that's been a challenge. So I think in general they're doing a pretty good job of dealing with the macro challenges. Where they're struggling is how to deal with the local in-class challenges, and they're not exactly sure what to do. And from what I've heard, it's a little all over the map.
The good news is there's so much innovation going on, right? Abbott has a 15-minute test, $5 test that they're going to be rolling out soon. The NFL has this little device to not contact tracing, it's more of a proximity device. And they got these rules set up. If you're a tier 3 and you go near a tier 1, which is usually a player, it beeps. So there's a lot of stuff that is happening. Amazing amount of stuff that hopefully the price points will drop enough that all of us can take advantage of them. So
yeah. Hopefully it'll be like RFID, right? RFID, $7 a tag when it came out, and now it's like a penny a tag.
But I'm glad that universities are thinking through that. It sounds like they're much better off than high schools are. It seems like the school system hasn't been able to do quite as much.
Yeah, the good news there is unfortunately usually the city politics, the the state politics really get in the way of being able to quickly make decisions for a lot of the K through 12 schools, and the bureaucracy that usually exists in a lot of the states. For higher ed, there's bureaucracy, don't get me wrong, but on the other hand, there's also usually a board that's saying you need to open up, otherwise you're going to go under. And that kind of pressure leads to quick decisions, I think, versus K through 12, where maybe they're used to striking and not being open anyway. So they don't. Unfortunately, I worry they don't take it as seriously.
Well, let's move on from higher education. Let's talk about your tech boards. You're in so many different. You got your hands in so many different things. The economy seems very uneven. It's almost a tale of two cities. Some tech companies are doing just amazingly, right? I wish I'd bought some Snowflake stock.
Yeah.
But I call it vertical edge applications. So telemedicine, those who could do PPP loans, those who've been able to work like Shopify to help merchants take advantage of e-commerce and last mile delivery and so on. Fantastic, right? On the other hand, others are, just barely skating by. What are you finding in your boards?
I'm definitely finding that the willingness to pivot is the key to success. Some companies try to insist that they can do the same and not react, and that's usually those are the ones having the challenges, without a doubt. The ones who are willing to pivot maybe one or two times and see where their customers want them to go or where the opportunities happen to be, those are the ones that are doing very well. One company I work with, they have a low-code platform and they also have an IoT, well, it's the same platform, low-code or IoT platform, and they quickly pivoted with some partnerships to deliver the IoT component, but connected to all these. So out of the box connected IR, scanning, location, tracking, temperature, facial recognition if you want it for, just being able to maybe not have people check you in and out of a building for sites that need physical check-in. They were able to roll that all out in a matter of like a month and a half, and they're just going gangbusters selling it. Now, thankfully for them, they'd already rolled out something like that in the Middle East, where it was actually more required for very different reasons, non-COVID related, but more about manpower tracking and payment and billing. And they were able to quickly take that and turn it into a new product. That's the kind of pivot that you want to see out of organizations that look for the opportunities and then run as quickly and test them out. The other area that I've seen that's the companies that have already embraced a cloud mentality and are able to leverage that cloud value proposition for work from home or working remote, and be able to talk about what this will be, make you be able to continue to operate or maybe operate an even higher efficiency in that kind of world. They've been doing very well by continuing to leverage that scenario and maybe push it even faster with new features that are specifically built for remote management or work from home activities.
It's funny. I've been telling people, if a vendor comes to you with what they had in the bag in January, be polite and say, come back to me in a year or two. I may need your product, but not right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's the pivots. I had a VC tell me, he says, they have an investment in a food tech company, and these guys sell fresh snacks through kiosks, and their big kiosks were at airports and in corporate cafeterias.
Oh.
Overnight, the market died. And he says, Vinnie, I fully expected the CEO to come to me and say, I need to lay off 90% of my staff. Let's see if we can survive, right? He says, this guy actually went to a bunch of hospitals, and they said, if you can get us fresh food, we'll buy everything you have.
Wow.
He went to schools whose catering has been cut off, and they said, whatever you have left over, we'll take. And he says, Vinnie, within 2 weeks, he was at 85% of previous revenue. So you just admire people who refuse to just roll over and die, and rethink and pivot. So.
Oh, exactly. My cousin's a restaurateur, one of the hardest industries, right? He quickly launched a catering business for people who just wanted to have, good catering, and maybe they just had their friends and family over in small groups, whatever was allowed. He quickly launched, the delivery service that everybody else has offered. And then he quickly redid his restaurant for outdoor dining and, social distancing. And he redid the cleaning thing. And same thing, he said within a short period of time, he was actually equal to his prior level of income. His biggest challenge, though, was he couldn't keep the staff on hand, because a lot of them were like, "Hey, with the government stimulus, I can sit at home and make a good living." So that he hasn't figured out yet. Of course, the government's going to help him out by not giving the stimulus.
every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So
Yep.
let's talk about the economy. So you're in so many different board roles. Give me a composite view. What do you expect? Do you expect a V recovery, a sharp recovery? Do you expect a gradual U? Do you expect a W kind of spike up and down depending on what happens with the virus and regional impact? Or an L, it's going to be dead for a while?
So I do expect a downturn. Most of the boards I'm on expect a downturn in the fall. There's a lot of debate about how big of a downfall. I mean, we saw a bit of a resurgence in traveling and hospitality in the summer. It started to come back. I mean, I'm one of the few people who still travels almost every week, and definitely the airports were becoming more normal instead of empty. But the business travel is not recovered. So that when the personal travel kind of dies off here in the fall, that we know that's going to have an impact on all those locations that depend on some level of that. So we expect to see a downturn. Having said that, I think there's a increased resiliency among people, excluding the memes of people getting angry about wearing masks. I mean, let's admit that's a very minority percentage of the population. Most people are used to the new norms. They're used to, and they're starting to do their more normal things. They're still going out, they're doing things. The hard thing will be the, unlike where you live, Vinnie, will be the cities that get cold here coming soon. How are they going to deal with the fact that they can't have all the outdoor, restaurants, they can't have the outdoor activities that they used to have, and how much will that be an impact? Most of us think it will be pretty sizable, and we could see some, increase in bankruptcies and that type of stuff going forward. I think in general, though, people have figured out how to do the remote work. The worrying trend I've heard recently is back to the manufacturing stuff we talked about. Manufacturers are really struggling to find people to do the manufacturing shop floor work. And part of the reason is that lack of training that you and I talked about earlier in this call, but also the fact that a lot of the manufacturing entry-level people are still sitting out and just taking the unemployment, taking the fees, and they're not coming back to work. So getting people back to work is going to be really key. And I know this is terrible to say, but starting to slowly pull back the incentives to stay home and not work is going to have to be part of it, because you can't keep paying people not to do things and expect the economy to recover.
Eric, you speak my mind. I have been running a series on people who have worked through the last 6 months. Ordinary people. It is so nice. I thank everybody who's been delivering stuff, cooking stuff, and so on. There's plenty of those. So, for those who have sat it out, there are plenty of others who have pivoted, innovated, scaled massively. So I'm a bit more optimistic than you are. But
yeah,
that's okay.
Having said that, I think there will be a big turnaround post the winter. I don't think it'll be due to the election like a lot of people propose. I think it'll be more due to the fact that we've gotten used to this new norm. Things will start. We've gotten, the death rate is way down. We figured out how to treat these things. People are not as scared about getting it as they used to be, rightfully so. Still cautious, but not scared. And then we'll start to see the vaccine get rolled out. No, it won't get rolled out as fast as we want, but it'll generate a lot of optimism in the world. And we all know that businesses thrive in times of optimism. Maybe the market's been a little too optimistic, but I think after January, February, we'll start to see an optimistic swing heading into summer next year.
Well, talking about optimism, in the Sunbelt spike, Florida had it, Texas had it, Arizona had it, California had it. What you're not hearing enough is our positives are 75% more than New York State's at this point, positive number of cases. Our fatalities, Florida is only 1/3 of New York's. California is 1/5 New York's adjusted for population. Several positive things have happened. Our hospitals have learned so much. How not to overventilate, how to create ICU capacity overnight, how to parachute people in from different states. Therapies are working. An Israeli company called Gilead has remdesivir that is making significant impact. just so many positives. Unfortunately, we're not hearing much about it, right?
No.
So I'm a lot more optimistic, but in the end, people like you are out there doing the hard work. So thank you for your service. And
Thanks, Vinnie.
any final thoughts?
Actually, on that last topic you just talked about, one of the things that I've been most impressed about is you hear a lot of negatives about testing. We don't have enough testing. We don't have enough testing, and yet we look at what the universities have been able to do with advanced testing twice a week. So and then I was real recently in Denver and got exposed, and I had to was exposed to someone who had COVID. I had to get myself a rapid test before I could fly home. Right? I was able to do it. Yes, I had to drive around to like 4 places to find a slot, but it was still doable. And I think this testing is a bit of a myth that you can't get tested. You can get tested. You can then self-quarantine if something's wrong. You can avoid spreading it. Most people I know are smart enough to go get tested because they want to know. They certainly don't want to end up in the hospital. And unfortunately, the media is making this out to seem like it's impossible to get tested. My whole family got tested very rapidly on the same day that they decided to go get tested recently. So it's not as dire as everybody says. And then if you take the right precautions around testing and you do the self-quarantine, which is easier now with work from home, we can get past this. We can smartly get past this without having, as you said, another giant resurgence.
We've gone from 0 to 50 million tests in 4 months. It's remarkable how much we've tested.
Agreed.
The CEO of Battelle, which is an R&D company, told me about they can disinfect a bunch of N95 masks in mass because they have a gasified hydrogen peroxide. He said they have disinfected 2 million N95 masks in 3 months. I mean, these are amazing
Excellent.
scales that you don't hear about, that is all happening. So
agreed. Completely agree.
Like you, I'm optimistic. Stay that way. Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Vinnie. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Stay safe.